Hello everybody, this is Cheri at djsundry.blogspot.com, and it has been quite a while since I've done a video, but I thought it was time to spend some time playing with different mediums so I could really get a handle on what they did and which ones I might prefer to use. And so some of these were things that I've had for quite some times. One of them, even though I'd had it for a while, is one that I don't think I'd ever really used, actually two of them. And then some of them were ones that I purchased specifically because I've been putting off purchasing them and I really wanted to try them. So as Tim Holtz says, sometimes you just need to play with what you have to see what it does and see what happens with it. So that's what I did. So let's move these aside. I'm not really going to show a lot of actual doing things in the video, but I'm going to show you the results of what I did. So the first thing that I wanted to compare were different mediums, and by mediums I mean like texture paste. I used embossing paste, I used the Tim Holtz distress paste. Now these three I actually purchased at Joann's. They're a little bit smaller and they come in a pack like this, and I thought that was a great way to really get in and play and see which ones I will use the most, and then when I'm ready to buy larger ones, I'll do that. Or maybe it just depends on how often you use this kind of thing. It may be best to always buy the small ones. So you can see the difference in the sizes here. This is actually Collage medium, but they're significantly smaller. Before we get into the Collage mediums, I do want to show you that these actually come in a 3-pack as well, where you can get a crazing, a matte, and a vintage. I don't even know why I bought that. I bought it a very long time ago, not realizing that I already had matte and crazing, and so I just have set that aside. I'm going to send that to someone, but I did want to use the vintage one in that one. But I had not purchased any of the texture paste. So we'll talk a little bit more about what comes in that pack when we move to them. So the first thing that I did want to do is play with texture and see what happens with them. So I pulled out these 6 and I started playing. So the first thing that I have is this Artist's Loft modeling paste. Now this ends up being kind of a rough texture, almost kind of, I don't want to say chalky, but a little bit chalky. This one is pure gloss, and this one kind of surprised me. I had not used this in quite some time, and I'm sure that when I bought it for a specific project. And I like what it did, but it didn't do what I expected it to do, which is okay because I learned how to use this. And then this is embossing paste. This I've had for a very long time. You can see it's kind of rusty and dirty. I actually need to seal it off with press and seal because I hadn't done that. But this has a really nice, almost whipped cream consistency. Really fun to work with. So I'll show you what I did with that. And then the 3 paste. Now when you buy this 3-pack, you get the matte texture paste and you get the crackle texture paste, and then you get the grit paste in translucent. Now I know that it also comes in a opaque, so that wasn't part of the pack and I don't have any of that. So what I did is I pulled those different textures. I did not do the embossing powder for this one. I just pulled the others and I made these tags. Now these are all identical as far as process, as far as stencil, as far as distress inks used, but you can see how they look very different. So I labeled these so that I would know which one I wanted to use when I was comparing my mediums. So this first one is the gloss medium. Now this is when I discovered that the gloss medium is completely a resist. The stencil that I used for this is a stencil that I've had for a while. I believe it's a Tim Holtz stencil that came in a set. I think it was one of the kits. Maybe it was a distress kit or something that I bought years ago. So that's the stencil I used, and it's in pretty rough shape, but that's what I used. So as you can see, it very much resisted the ink. So on this side what I have is Selvage Patina regular dye-based ink, and on this side I have on this side over here, I have the Oxide Selvage Patina ink. And it does a really cool effect. Now through the stencil, I also noticed that it dries back a little bit chunky, I guess you could say. It's not quite as clean as if you had used embossing powder as a resist probably. But then it's not a stamp, it's a stencil, so it's going to look a little bit different. So if you are looking for a resist, this actually is a pretty good resisting medium. And you know, if I wanted to go back and kind of play with it, I know that I could have inked my tag before, and then put the medium over the top, let it dry, and then come back and inked, and it would have been 2-tone or 3-tone or whatever you want to do. So there's lots of possibilities with that. So that's the first one. The next one, we're just going to pull them one at a time. This is the Distress Texture Paste in Matte. Now I wanted to compare that with the Artist Loft modeling paste. So this is the Artist Loft and this is the Tim Holtz Distress. They are very, very similar in the way that they react. Now I would say that the Tim Holtz for me is a little bit smoother, a little bit less chalky, I guess you would say, than the modeling paste, but very, very similar in the way that they react. Again, we've got on this side, and to me that's right. On the right side we have just the regular Distress ink, and on the left side we have the Distress Oxide, and again in Selvage Patina. Now I would say that I think that perhaps the Tim Holtz takes the color a little bit better over the top of the paste. Again, I didn't spend a lot of time painting and doing stuff with it, but it looks like at a glance that it took the color a little bit better. I don't know that if you couldn't find the texture paste from the Distress Texture Paste, I think that this Artist Loft, and you can just get this at Michael's, would be a pretty good thing that you could try. So just something to try. Again, both had great results. This one's a little bit lighter, this one's a little bit darker in the way that it took the ink. I can't promise that that wasn't, maybe I was a little bit more heavy-handed going in over the ink on this one, or maybe it really did just take it a little bit stronger. But those, they're very, very similar in the way that they react. So that is the Artist Loft acrylic modeling paste and the Tim Holtz matte texture paste. So moving on, we are going to come to the grit paste. Now this is probably not the best test for grit paste. You can definitely feel that gritty texture on this one. It actually took the ink very well. If you look at it compared to the matte, you know, there's obviously going to be some difference in the feel of it. This is definitely a little bit rougher. It's not a huge difference. And I think probably if you were thinking, okay, do I get a big bottle this size and do I just get one? Then I would probably just go with, sorry, I said it back already. I would probably just go with the matte. Because I think that you're going to achieve a very similar effect. Now, this is the translucent. There's so much more you could do with this. This is just for this test. There's not a lot of difference. I think that there are other things that you could do. You can build up extra layers. I did not color the pastes at all, so that might have a different effect. These were actually inked over with foams. And so I think it just depends on what you're trying to achieve, on if you want that rougher, grittier texture or if you want that smoother texture that you get. I would say almost, if you were comparing the three, between the two Tim Holtz and the Artist Loft, they would probably, as far as smoothness, go in order from the matte medium to the Artist Loft to the grit. But there's not a lot of difference between these two. So just something to think about it. Now, as far as taking color, it took color beautifully. Did a great job, as we would expect distressing to. Now, I did kind of spritz over these with a little bit of water, just kind of dripped water in it. Because of all the texture, you really don't see that as well. But again, that's not what I was testing, so I was okay with that, but just something to think about. That is the grit paste. Now the last one we come to, and I think a different color could show this better, and I don't know that the camera is going to pick this up well. Let's see if I can bring it up, but it definitely has, to the eye, you definitely see the crackle in this. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of the crackle look of the 80s and 90s. That big heavy crackle that was kind of all the rage back then. This crackle is a much finer crackle, and perhaps if I had used like some vintage photo or something, that would show it off better. This is definitely more subtle than that old big crackle that we used to see, and I really like it. So definitely one that I will keep in my, I definitely will get a bigger one of it when I'm out, just because it is fun to play with that different texture, and I can see a lot of good uses for that. Again, it takes up the ink inside of the cracks. I don't think you can see it that well in here, but there is ink inside of the crack, and it's just a really fun thing to do. So that is the crackle paste. So that takes us through those particular mediums. So the next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to see how they took embossing glaze or embossing powder. So I pulled my Tim Holtz stencil out, and this I know is kind of ugly and grungy, but that was by design. That's what I wanted to do because I was looking for something in particular. But I used this Cargill THS-001 stencil, and I went through and I put 3 on each one. So on this first one, on the top we have the Wendy Vecchi embossing paste, and then on the next one we have the acrylic modeling paste, and at the bottom we have the Downy or the Daler and Rowney gloss medium. I used crackling campfire glaze, and then I wanted to kind of just see what it would do. All of them, including, we'll talk about this one in a minute, but all of them did fine. They all embossed well with the crackling campfire glaze. This top one, the one that's the Wendy Vecchi, it is the smoothest of any of the ones of the other brands outside of Tim Holtz. It's very much smooth and feels like embossing, probably with a little bit more raise than your normal embossing would have, because it is that creamy, whipped creamy texture, and so it's a little bit, it's definitely smoother and a little bit shinier. The Artist Loft has a little bit of a rougher texture. It still takes it well. It was something that I did, but it's a little bit rougher. Now, closer to the Wendy Vecchi embossing powder is the Daler and Rowney acrylic gloss medium. It actually took it pretty well too. Now this one's pretty smooth. These others maybe not quite as smooth, which I'm wondering if I actually need to heat those up a little bit. But these two, the top and the bottom one, would be very similar in the way they took it. So then I wanted to play with the same ones using, I think you can see from the top that this is the crackle, and then I used the grit and the matte on the bottom. Definitely the smoothest one out of all of them is the matte medium. A lot smoother. It's still a little bit rougher in texture than what the embossing paste is and what the Daler and Rowney is, but it still is a nice texture. The grit is, again, very definitely grittier than the others. Not dramatically so, but it does have a little bit more tooth to it. And then the crackle, it actually crackled the embossing powder, which you can see. So that's why kind of the grunge on top, I went over that with, I think it was Vintage Photo, just to see if I could pull in some of that brown undertone in with the crackling campfire, and it did. So not surprising that those are what the results were, but that is what I found when I was doing that. So all 6 of the different textures actually worked for embossing, which is exactly what I expected it to do. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for something a little rougher with that rougher texture, or if you're looking for something a little bit smoother, on which one of those that you would choose. So those are the the textures and the texture paste that I have. I know that there's a lot more out there. That's just what I have personally in my stash. So now we're going to move on to our Distress collage mediums. So again, I opened this one up to work with for this video, and I will be using this more. This one is the Distress collage medium in vintage. It's just what it says, and you can pretty much guess what you're going to see when you see this. It's going to remind you of that vintage photo color a little bit. Definitely kind of grunges things up, makes it look a little bit older. You've got your crazing, which is the one I want to play with a little bit. I'm going to play with both of these two on camera. But the crazing is supposed to take almost a light crackle to it. And then this one is just your regular matte collage medium, which I've used. You've used something similar. I do have to say that I like collage medium better than I like Mod Podge. Now, I've used Mod Podge a lot, and you know, back in the day when I was in grade school or junior high, we would put white glue over the top. They all do the same things. What I like about the collage mediums or the matte mediums that Ranger has and other people have over the others is they seem not to be as sticky when they dry. Sometimes I found that when Mod Podge dries, you have to let it dry a lot longer because it stays a little bit sticky. This dries pretty quickly and it doesn't stay sticky like what Mod Podge to me does. Now, it's been a while since I bought new Mod Podge. I have a bunch of it in the drawer. I did not bring it out for this video, but and I didn't use it, but I just like the fact that I just did this just an hour ago or less. And again, nothing fancy. It wasn't my plan to do anything fancy. I was just scribbling to see how it would take different mediums. Now, I will tell you that this is a second set of tags that I made, because one thing that I forgot is that collage medium will serve as somewhat of a resist for regular inks, and it doesn't really stick as well, but I used Distress crayons and it did just fine. So I took this first layer, the bottom layer is just collage paper that I have. I have an old collage paper. I don't think they come like this anymore, but this is actually tissue wrap, and it's in the melange. I've had it for years and I just use little bits of it and I love it. I just forget to use it, and so it ends up sitting in my stash. And then I used ephemera from the Field Notes ephemera pack, and then the sentiment is from Simon Says Stamp, and these are some I just picked up, and I've got them in black and white, and then I've got them in white with black, and I just picked them up just a week or so ago from Simon Says Stamp. I believe it was called Encouraging Phrases, but it's just a bunch of sentiments, and they're nice heavy chipboard. So I put these down with the matte collage, put them down, layering each layer, you know, put a layer of the collage on it, put the first layer of the collage paper or the tissue paper, then I put this piece of ephemera, and then I layered over the top of it, and then I put this piece of ephemera, etc. until I got through. And then once it was dry, then I started putting in some colors. The colors I used were peacock feathers, shaded lilac, and then I wanted to see what the tarnished brass, if it would take up a little bit of brass in there. And it's subtle, but it's in there. And I just kind of scribbled and played. Again, nothing fancy. My goal wasn't to go with fancy. I just wanted to see how it worked. This works. So that was the first thing. So now the second one that I made, second and third that I have here, this one is the crazing one. Again, same packs of everything used, but this is the crazing medium, and then this is the vintage medium. So you can see, same tag, and the tags that I used are just some shipping tags, and I know services matter. These are just some old shipping tags that I've had in my stash for years and years. They're not even a name brand. They are true shipping tags. But I just wanted to play with them. So obviously they're not going to have that durability of like your Tim Holtz multimedia tags, but they're still nice little tags. So obviously you can see at a glance, there's no coloring in these at all. So this one is other than the ephemera colors. But this one is using the vintage collage medium versus the crazing. So let's see how these take color. So I'm going to start, because this is the boldest color, I'm going to start with a little bit of peacock feather, and I'm just going to kind of scribble it on there, and then take my fingers and rub it in and kind of see. Actually, let's grab a baby wipe over here. You would not believe the mess that my desk is in. Yeah, baby wipe's gonna just kind of bring it all, most of it off, leave just a little bit behind. And it probably would have on the other one. I used my fingers on the other one too. But if you use your fingers and rub a little bit in, it'll take up a little bit of that color. I could probably wipe a lot of that brightness off that butterfly if I did the same. But it's kind of hard to pick up in the camera, but there is that subtleness of the peacock feathers under there. Just being picked up. If I put it in larger batches, it definitely picks up the color, and that's the way it looks like, what it looks like. Let's add some of the other. Again, I'm not trying to do anything fancy. I'm not making anything. I'm just playing with the mediums to see how they work. Again, they work great. I could rub it off if I did it right away, just like I did before with the baby wipe. Let's not do that. Oops, I grabbed the wrong one. Oh well, I guess I needed some lilac down there too. I think that's a little bit more color than I wanted, so let's kind of dab that off a little bit. And let's go to the tarnished brass that I just threw the lid on the floor. This one's a lot more difficult to see on here, and it's definitely, I mean, it's there. It's adding just that hint of a sheen that I don't even know that the camera's picking it up, but you can see it right in here that it's just picking up that sheen. Let's just add some more down here, rub it out. And there we have that one. So again, it still looks vintage, looks a little bit older now. Kind of take away from that with that brightness of the peacock feathers. If you wanted to keep it vintage, that's probably not the color you would want to be using, but for this purpose of the demo, that's what I use. So that's kind of what that looks like. Again, simple. It's still pretty. You know, I think your samples should be something that you enjoy to look at, and so that's still pretty, but just something kind of fun and grungy. I think I could add some more colors in there and really make this look pretty. I think, you know, maybe I would want to, if I wanted to preserve it for a long time after it dried, maybe I could add some microglaze, but I probably won't. I'll probably just let it dry because it's not going to be doing anything to get rubbed off. So now let's see the crazing one. And I'm saving it for last because I'm really curious to see what happens with it. So, and you'll notice I've got a lot of empty space up here, a bit by design, because I wanted to see if I could really pick up that soft crackle that's supposed to be in there. So this is really bold, probably bolder than what I want it to be. Oh yeah, you can see just barely. When you rub some of that off, I'm going to just gently rub it off, because what you're going to see when you do, I can tell by playing with it, that then it takes on that subtleness. And look, when I move the baby wipe over it, that it's not really crackle like what you think of traditional crackle, that's like this, where it's got like a crackle beading. It's more like striations, and the striations pick up the color. Again, really difficult to see. Maybe I'll be able to see it a little bit better when I take the photos. I doubt it. But it is definitely a different effect that's kind of fun. And again, when you wipe away that top layer, it just kind of stays in the striations in the crazing itself. Super fun. So each medium that we've played with has a different effect. Which is obviously why they were made, is so that you could play with those different effects. But sometimes it's fun to just get out your supplies, see what you have, and see what your preference is going to be for that project. Now, my normal preference probably wouldn't be this, but it's something that's fun. My normal preference probably definitely wouldn't be this, because I'm not so much into the vintage, but the more I look at this, the more I really like it. I'm more of, you know, the matte, the ones that's going to show a little bit more smoothness in it. So just get out your mediums and play with them. See what they can do. You know, if you find a sale and want to grab one of these, grab them. See what happens with them. See what you can learn. And then go out and make things with the things that you learn. So thanks so much for stopping by today. And remember, take some time to enjoy the little things. Have a great day. Bye.